as I was working on my career, trying to get to the next level, and always doubting myself in terms of like, oh, this is not going to be for me. Oh, this is not coming to me. This is going to go to somebody else. And actually, kind of through that process, I was unfortunately manifesting that because I wasn't able to be in alignment with what was showing up for me because I was always scared. And I was like, and I think that's what you helped me work through is like, why was I feeling like that? And every time there was a new opportunity, every time I was, being shown something that I could step into, I was afraid or always felt like I wasn't good enough for that.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, the Legacy Edition, where conscious leaders unite to unlock their highest potential so collectively we can change the way the game is being played. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, changing the way this game is being played. And I am sitting live next to my co-host, Tracy Allen, in her beautiful cottage. We've got the lake behind us. We just finished our active recovery walk around the lake this morning, and we are coming in ready to unpack something that we were actually talking about together on our walk, which is just this whole concept of scarcity that we hear people talking about right now. We've definitely been talking about that from a really high level, I feel like, since about June when you first joined me on the pod, right? And we realized that we want to go to more depth and breadth on this because this is such a huge theme that we're not only seeing and feeling in our own leadership lanes, but also in terms of, I know, like the talks I'm getting asked to deliver right now, and just like the resources that I'm being asked to inject into these high performing teams right now. It's all about trying to understand strategically from a mindset perspective, how do we get our people out of scarcity?
Yes, I love it.
And so I want to just talk about, where we left off last time is that we're learning how to unpack our red flag emotions for the purposes of really starting to isolate and illuminate where these deficit beliefs, these limited beliefs are hiding out in our experience. We learned how to practice the pivot last week. Hopefully that's a practice that you've been taking action on in real time, because when we go deeper with this topic, you're going to see it really managing scarcity in our nervous system, in our mindset, in our experience. It really is something that has to penetrate the nervous system level of depth in your development and training, right? So let's take a trip down memory lane, since I'm here in your cottage and we were talking about this topic this morning. So what are your thoughts in terms of how all of what we've been really getting deep on with the pivoting with our people is connected to how we manage that scarcity in our experience, especially right now when we notice it's so ripe as empathic leaders?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important. I know when we started working together, I didn't know what scarcity looked like and how it showed up in my life, right? So I think it's really important to kind of help our viewers and listeners kind of understand what scarcity is, because it took me a long time before I could really understand how to tie this back to how I felt, how things were showing up, how I was reacting, and how it all tied back to scarcity. And it was a big part of my evolution, I think, as an individual, and how like I'm kind of, ascending in terms of learning how to cope with that. And I've obviously had some adaptive, maladaptive behaviors around that. But I think it's really important to kind of like help everyone kind of understand what that looks like and how it shows up in your life, because I think it can show up in many different facets. I think it shows up, some people it could be money, some people could be love, some people could be, it could be in many different ways of how you react to certain situations. And until you really understand, again, the backstory of how that's coming in, I think you can't actually auto-correct it, because you don't understand. You're in those high pressure situations and you're just reacting, and you don't really understand why you feel this way. And you think actually a lot of people feel that way. But it can really lead you down a very, very dark path. And that was my experience as a leader, being, as I was working on my career, trying to get to the next level. and always doubting myself in terms of like, oh, this is not going to be for me. Oh, this is not coming to me. This is going to go to somebody else. And actually, kind of through that process, I was unfortunately manifesting that because I wasn't able to be in alignment with what was showing up for me because I was always scared. And I was like, you know, and I think that's what you helped me work through is like, why was I feeling like that? And every time there was a new opportunity, every time I was, you know, being shown something that I could step into, I was afraid or always felt like I wasn't good enough for that. And then also just like overrunning on my own kind of patterns in terms of people pleasing, because that was also tied to my scarcity, because scarcity for me was around being, you know, seen, valued, but also very much being successful in terms of being able to care and serve my family in the way that they need, which, you know, we were able to kind of like work through in terms of, you know, my backstory of my upbringing and how that kind of actually is the reason why I feel this way. And I wasn't able to work through that without having somebody show me those correlations that were showing up for me, and that how I can then understand, going back to what we talked about last week, what is the truth about this situation now, right? And should I be really afraid? What am I afraid of, right? Where's the scarcity coming in? Well, it's for me is a lot around, you know, a people pleasing. And then that's the way I'm going to actually be successful and make the money I need to be able to serve my family. And so being able to work with you to kind of show me that backstory that live there, and then understanding that's not true, that I am capable of doing that. So I think that's kind of, we can walk through and kind of that process that we did together, because I think a lot of people have that. I think it's really common. And I think with high stakes that we have going on right now with, you know, companies and change and uncertainty and the velocity that everything is moving at, we need to be in alignment and really understand to trust ourselves, because that external stuff is just always going to change.
And when we don't trust ourselves, we have no other way to navigate, right, and govern decisions in the world, because we've been looking at how the brain's meant to keep us safe and alive. Like, if that's its only device, it's going to be left to its devices, right? Especially when the stakes are high and the pressure's rising, because uncertainty is starting to open up. And that's the thing I want to just keep emphasizing for our folks. If that's your experience right now, not because we're masochists, but because we've both been through this gauntlet of needing to understand, you know, that we were operating in scarcity. You know, the thing that I am challenged the most with when working with high achievers is that it's so normalized. We just think that that's the way the world is, and thus this is the way we need to navigate the world, but because it's been our blueprint of the world since we were unconscious of the reality of the world, right? And so of course, when left to its own devices, if that's how our brain had to maladapt back then, which we've been starting to illuminate in our backstories, if we haven't come to this helm consciously as an adult and really started to understand that pedal to the metal need for speed that we feel in the intensity of our nervous system every day is not motivation. It's anxiety. It's not safe, not safe, not safe on the inside of our experience. And there's only one place for your brain and your decision-making, and thus your behavior, to go from there, right? Is that we, every single day, getting launched from a cannon, even more so when the uncertainty is ripe in our environment, we're going to have to control things outside of us in order to survive our way through that gauntlet. And so that's the thing that we want to keep putting emphasis on. If this is opening up in your experience and you're feeling this level of powerlessness because the ways that you used to maladapt your way through the storms is no longer available to you, I want you to recognize that that is the opportunity for growth dressed up and disguised as adversity. That's why we're putting so much emphasis on the need to penetrate the emotional level of how you're experiencing the world right now, because that's all the data in your nervous system that's really going to start to help us understand the difference between fight or flight, which we've been saying puts us into the tunnel, right? When we're coming from fear, we have no other choice but to force, versus being able to come from the helm, aligned with the truth of who we are. This is everything we've been working on, really starting to adaptively develop in this new space and place of empowerment. Because when we actually come back to the helm first, inside first, before we go outside, right? Then all of that is where the locus of control really lives. That's the truth of who we are. And if we can see that, and we can know that that never changes, no matter the circumstances that are changing around us, and we can understand how to trust that capacity that is always inside of us, then obviously that's what we're talking about is going to be the best play and strategy through any storm. We trust ourselves now through the storms because we've been able to understand all of that intrinsically first, including the things that we value that are most important to us. That, yeah, the way in which we're pursuing those in our lives, we're mothers, our kids are going to grow up, they're going to go, fly their wings and leave our nest. And so change, the only thing that is constant is change. And so if we understand how to open up those resources, right? And this is the abundance mentality or mindset. What we're really talking about there is it's not an intellectual exercise, right? We very much will feel a sense of trust starting to develop inside of us. And the more trust we can accrue inside of us in terms of our sense of truth and knowingness, then that starts to give us the resources required to actually be creative, rather than force our way through, right? Rinse and repeating, actually flow our way through in a creative or co-creative way. That is the point of the exercise. I feel like that we're all going through right now, right? We all know the world is changing, and thus the way we lead ourselves and lead others needs to change, but that requires adaptive strategies. And so that is very much an emotional exercise, going from powerless to powerful, especially when uncertainty is ripe. But I think that's everything that we're trying to really put emphasis on for our folks, right? Because I think that, to me, is where people really, really struggle and suffer the most needlessly, in my opinion, because it's 2025 and we have access to this type of knowledge now and this type of practice. But yeah, I think that's where people stop short of the goal line. Yeah. Is they don't think that they need to go that deep in terms of really understanding, like, the fastest way and the most reliable way to identify that you're in scarcity, not abundance, is the way you feel, is your nervous system. It will tell you everything. That's why you have it. Those RPMs, in terms of the arousal that your nervous system uses to produce energy and resources, all of that is measured by our BPMs, not our RPMs. But that's something that is so accessible to everybody right now. But it's something, and I want you to speak to this because with high achievers, we want to go outside first. We want to focus on things we can see, that we know, that are reliable and certain. And it's the hardest thing for us to slow down and actually start to pay attention to that anxiety. We just want to go. We want to run away from it. And so I think we stop short of that goal line and deny ourselves the opportunity of going through this gauntlet that actually is a portal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me anyway, it was always, after you understand what the backstory is and why you feel a certain way, that created beliefs for you to go into scarcity. Like, then you understand it, but then it's not just done. Then it's about proof and evidence to collect that, because going through the portal is one thing, but did you go in successfully, and did you get that proof and evidence that you'll do it again? Because we tend to go back to, if we didn't, we can get really scared in certain situations and get doubtful of ourselves, and then we tend to fall back. And then, but one thing that I think we've worked on, right, is collecting that proof and evidence of trusting myself, right, and being able to really understand why this shows up for me, actually surrendering to it and understanding that it's okay. I'm not broken. It's actually just my experience and why I'm here to learn this. It's not actually my lesson of why I'm here. I'm not here to worry about money. That's not my purpose. And I've been taught that. And, you know, you and I talk about this, but we also, you know, well, for me specifically, I also do believe in channeling and medium, and I do lean on that for help, right? And I know that for me, that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to learn lessons about money, but my dad was. So like, I need to detach that from my life, right? And where I'm ascending and what my purpose is here. And so being able to like separate that and understand that that's not my story, and being able to like put that into, this is why I'm here. And really, that's why we talk about understanding what is your mission, what is your purpose, because we all have that. And when you can get very clear on that, then it's about ignoring all the other little bumps that are coming up, that are showing up, and understanding that that's not your stuff. That's somebody else's stuff that I need to now regulate for myself. I understand it. It's clear. I see it and I don't shame it, but I just kind of have to take it. This is not for me. And being able to get clear on my mission and my values and my purpose helps me step into my power. And you and I talked about that yesterday. It's like, I'm really clear on why I'm here, and I'm not going to let anything get in the way of that. Not scarcity, not any triggers. I'm going to step into courage, and I'm just going to take that forward. And you know what? If that wasn't my path, or maybe I have a bump along the way, maybe it's just not the timing. We all know that divine timing is all there for us too. It could be that this was just not the right step and not the right time, but it's a little detour. And if you can just trust those little detours and those little waves and those little paths that we have to take, because there's a lesson in those, most likely. And I see this showing up for myself. It's just about trust and courage. And I just need to like step into it. And you know what? I'm fully open to whatever is going to show up for me on the other side of that.
Yeah, because that's ultimately it's the hardest thing. If we're in scarcity, it's the hardest thing for us to trust is when the path deviates. Or when a roadblock pops up, right? But we always talk about those are the tests, right? It's like just testing our alignment. It's like, how sure are you that that's what you're here for? Or how sure are you that you're really capable of that? And this is the way that we actually build and fortify and accrue more of that self-trust, right? Is when we are so deeply in our alignment in terms of the truth of who we are, what we're made of, and what we believe all of that is for in terms of the impact we want to make on our legacy track. But if we're trying to force our way to controlling those outcomes, then obviously we're not going to feel so great when those roadblocks or those deviations start to pop up along the way. It's going to trigger scarcity. Right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like, we talked about this yesterday. Just imagine if you could just be open and in flow and have no scarcity, how you could just be so much more effective, but also like open and emotionally available. Like, so I'm not, you and I, we're not saying that's like, that perfection is like the aspiration. It could be, but that's not my aspiration. I love feeling the way I feel. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not great, but it really helps me then when I start getting those doubts. I have to go inwards. And then I have to actually discern those feelings that I have around like, really? Do you really think you can't do this? Like, are you kidding with all the things that we have been working on? I tell myself, right? All these things that we've been working towards, and you're not thinking you can do this or you can't try? No, like, that's why I am here. And when you're so clear on like what your purpose is, nothing will stop you, right? Even that scarcity, it's just, I know enough that's not my stuff. And so, you know what? I'm not going to let that derail me, because if I do that, then I haven't even tried. And I can just pack it in, just be done and just go and try to chase the world on where they're trying to make you. But that's not going to bring you happiness. That's not, you're never going to be in flow with why you are here and feel fulfilled. You're always chasing the next opportunity or the next thing that you think people want you to chase. And that's not why we're here. Right?
Right. Because if we're just chasing the next, we talked about this when we were talking about values clarification. Those aren't your values. Like, hinted, those aren't your values. If it's you just constantly and chronically need to prove, whether it's, you know, from your backstory in terms of what you're trying to prove is true about money, or if you're trying to prove because now you've had other leaders that were models that carried weight, right? That you're trying to prove yourself to, like we're saying, that all of those are symptomatically indicators, right? That we are not actually co-creating our own story, right? We're not actually at the helm and making free decisions, which is how we know when we're in abundance. That's why we're saying all of this empowering beliefs. These are the things that we're really trying to step into and develop right now, right? Because at the end of the day, when we are actually able to trust that, then we no longer are attached to that which has been programmed in us, right? As a backstory, and might not even be our story. It might be our parents' story or some boss we had along the way, or what the news is telling us, right? You know, it's all, I think, in this beautiful way, trying to illuminate where you are robbing yourself of the privilege to actually step into the purpose that is you, which is why you've manifested this life of yours, right? And we talk about that from a soul level, but even just in terms of, like the legacy level, the impact that you want to make level. And I think that's what's really opening up for people right now. It's just really, really, really hard to see that if you are not having this type of practice. And that's why we're trying to seed all of these practices that we use to actually identify, because no, we're not immaculately in abundance all the time. This is not what we're trying to suggest is the standard, but it's the desire for you to want to step to the helm, even when things are uncomfortable. Yes. And do that work. And the reason why we do that work, last night talking about it this morning on our walk, right, is because we're very much conscious to the fact that every day we wake up is that opportunity, is that privilege for us to write our stories, you know? And I think in a really massive global collective way, this is what's being catalyzed.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I've been thinking about is just imagine like how many people we have in our network that we talk to, that we're influenced by, that show up in our lives for one reason or another, all have beliefs, all have backstories. Most people don't do this work. Would you agree? I think it's hard work. We're starting to awaken this whole like topic around mindset and ascendance. So imagine if we're following and, you know, trying to please people around us that are not in alignment, how unaligned the whole world is right now.
Exactly.
Right? And then the contrast to that is, imagine everybody does the work and everybody's in full alignment and everybody is they all understand their purpose, their mission, and how we collectively do this together. How effective could we be as a collective? And that just kind of like makes it worth the work. When you think of that ambition of like, imagine. And the way I get motivated to do the work is like, think about the people in your life that have all their own experiences. And if you are a people pleaser trying to chase that, is that really what, like, that is scary for me. And that I need to get really, really clear on and go back and say, yeah, that is not safe.
That's what we're really trying to lay down here in terms of scarcity versus abundance, you know, is like, it's so counterintuitive. We really do unconsciously believe that controlling outcomes and gaining that certainty outside of us is safety. But really what we're trying to make the case for here, folks, is that that is the very opposite of safety. How do we know? We're bringing you all the way down to your nervous system. We're teaching you about what that energy actually means is true in terms of the experience of reality that you are living every day and perpetuating if you are stuck on your autopilot and you're not getting curious about these sorts of things. Safety is what we're suggesting abundance to be, right? We don't worry about necessarily ourselves in storms these days because we know that we're safe, because we know who we are. We know that safety lives inside of us. And it's that perspective of knowing our truth that is safety in this world, right? Because at the end of the day, nobody can ever take that away from us. Right. When we can ground down into that reality that we actually are in control of our destiny, we are co-creators. This is what the human experience is all about. When we can take time to ground down into and align with that truth, which is actually the truth about safety. How do we know? Because that's what registers in the nervous system as safety. When we actually come into alignment in this powerful way, we know that it takes us out of the sympathetic overdrive, puts us into the parasympathetic. And at the end of the day, when you play that game tape forward in terms of the difference between operating with limited resources versus abundance of possibilities, because we're always resourced up and that's something we always know how to be in control of. I trust that. There's like a predictability to that in terms of what's the outcomes that are going to show up when I just align with and own and fall in love with the process of orienting this way in my self-leadership. And ultimately towards how we see leadership in the world as well. Because I think when you go to a macro scale, you can see where all the suffering is ensuing from, right? Is when we have these unconscious leaders at the helm in scarcity, right? Trying to control all of us in these ways that we know are not setting us up to be able to play in this expansive, free, empowered, safe way. It's setting us up all to feel and thus believe that we are not safe and thus have to operate like this.
Exactly.
So I love it. We're obviously very passionate about this subject, and that's why we wanted to hop on the mic and bring all of this inspiration. And hopefully that's the way that it's landing in your experience right now. I know that we've been talking about what's going on in the ethers from all of these different entry points since June. But yeah, we're really going after this in our own experience. As you can see, it's the weekend. It's not actually Tuesday. I'm in Ottawa with Tracy live. But yeah, this is where we are on the weekend as well in our active recovery practices, because this is the other piece, you know, as much mindset work as we're doing, we're equally doing as much in terms of making sure our boundaries are strong and we're taking time outside. And we were in a cold tub yesterday and doing the sauna therapies, that we're really going the extra mile and doubling down on our active recovery practices as well, because we know that that equally is important for our nervous system to be able to stay in a state of balance. But yeah, we're really coming at this topic from all these different angles, because we understand what we're up against. Individually, collectively, we're both in the trenches every single day in people's experiences, and we have our finger on that pulse. That's how we lead. That's how we show up and meet our people where they're at, so that we can empower them through the storms. And this is this is everything we're seeing, and it's everything we're spinning around and leveraging in our people's perspective right now. And we are also seeing the possibilities open up on the other side, the hope, the inspiration, the power. And we really are trying to inspire you all to feel some of that and catch some of that inspirational backdraft so that you can get into practice with these things too. This is not an intellectual exercise. You cannot intellect your way out of scarcity. And that's like the most important message that we're trying to land. I think it's heartbreaking for me when I, first see a high achiever who doesn't realize that life is supposed to be enjoyable. We're supposed to feel passionate about our pursuits, our purpose, our mission, our legacy. These are not actually privileges that are, we're lead high performance, but that's not what that's all about. It's not supposed to be a privileged experience for less than 1/3 of us to experience. We're all supposed, that's our divine right. We're all worthy of that. It's just that, unfortunately, we're not set up that way in our homes, our schools, our jobs, right? And this is something that we know we've had to initiate and take self-leadership towards developing in our own lane. But we also want to help you see some of the possibilities in our models in terms of just like, the difference between striving, surviving, and thriving, which is exactly what we're doing right now. We have all this abundance of energy to bring you on a Saturday because that is what comes from doing the work. It literally is a capacity play. Leadership's all about capacity. I've said this a couple of times on the mic, but it's exactly like being a pro athlete to me. That's why I train the way I do still in my profession, even though it's not on the ice, it's on the mic, but it's all about capacity. And it is so worth that investment in your capacity.
I love that.
Anything you'd like to leave our folks with?
No. Well, just one thing. I want to, try to inspire people to really show up to the challenge in terms of doing the practice, because even just this week I was to the test of that. And as a leader, we are responsible for showing up for our people. That is what we signed up for. And I truly believe that, sometimes it can be scary for whatever triggers we might be having and emotions and reactions, but it is our responsibility. If we are leaders, and we are leaders, everybody is a leader. Either you're leading your family or you're leading a team, or even within a group of friends, we all look up to each other, right? In one way or another, and more some than others. But, I just want to make a, call out to really kind of look into that space for yourself, because, showing up for others and having an impact positively on their life or their challenges or their uncertainty that they're seeing, that is what leadership is. And I think that, if everybody can step in and do a little bit of work, I think could just be such a better collective place to be.
Definitely. That's rising tides lifts all boats, right? I think it's, it's ultimately what we're trying to say about leadership is that we're all leaders because we all lead ourselves, and the way we lead ourselves does impact the world, folks. There's no way around it. The second you interface with another human being, you're in leadership. And we want to make sure that we all view ourselves as leaders so we can answer that call, right? It's very easy for us to say, oh, I'm not a leader. I don't carry influence. I don't matter. What I do doesn't matter. And that's also something that we're trying to bring consciousness to, because that's actually not true. How we lead ourselves impacts the way we show up for others. And ultimately that carries weight. There's a ripple effect to our energy. And so that's why we're talking about co-creation, because we want us to be able to lead ourselves consciously into those human to human interactions, whatever the dynamics are, but doing that in a way where you're actually being intentional in these ways so that we can send the right energy out into the ethers. That's everything that our empathic hearts are feeling this call towards, is the fact that not enough of us are conscious about that.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, is what all of this ruckus is trying to awaken, right? Our curiosity towards.
Yeah.
So hopefully you enjoyed this live riff. This is actually the first time I've done a live riff on the pod, and I am loving it. The energy was good. I think we're going to have to do more of these, but we'd love to hear from you. Just in case our instincts are wrong, we're obviously enjoying ourselves over here, as we always do when we show up in our flow and alignment, which is something we take very seriously, you know, in terms of our modeling that possibility for all of you. Hit us with that feedback, though. We're in the year of co-creation, and we want to know if we're sending the right energy out into your earwaves. We want to know if this is hitting the mark. We want to know where you're at in terms of the integration of these practices that we've been laying out and suggesting are kind of game changer. You know, this is what changed the game for us when we learned to go inside out versus outside in. It really packs the power to change the way this game's being played, but that absolutely starts with all of you. Hit us with that feedback. Hit us with any questions that you have. We've got some really exciting guests coming on the podcast.
Could you want to say that a little bit?
You introduce her because you were the one who had this amazing download and inspiration to bring her in. It's kind of innovative for the LLP.
Yeah. Well, so we have a really special guest next week. Her name is Mikey Gabrieli, and she is amazing. But why we think it's so important for this work is that you and I have dibbled and dabbled in human design. And if you want to get to know yourself, I won't go into a lot of details, but there is a finite number of energies, and there is a very scripted, you know, number of people that are made up in this world. And so it's very tangible information, and it's all related to obviously your birth date and when you were born, the time you're born, how the stars were aligned, and how the planets were. So it's really cool. And we're really excited to have her on our show next week. And I am like a super big fan of hers, and I've done a one-on-one with her, and she's absolutely fabulous. But the reason we're bringing this to you is this will help you get to know yourself, to just take another layer off of that onion, just to get to know exactly, and you will resonate, I promise. So for me, and I think for you as well,
definitely
so clear in terms of who we are as individuals, and understanding the people around you and your family, and being able to like understand what motivates them, why they are the way they are, is quite fascinating. So we're looking forward to bringing that to you all next week. So it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, I found it so validating. It gave me so much permission, you know, like, because we obviously generate a lot of energy. So sometimes we're like, in our understanding of scarcity and abundance, trying to make sure, like, is that the play? And I think it was so validating in terms of the purpose and the alignment, in terms of really giving you permission to play with your energy in these ways that gets you to that next step of depth. It's really cool when you start using it on your kids. Right. And then obviously with teammates that you're on teams with, that where it's so cool. And we're really in an innovative space, obviously, here at the LLP. And so we cannot wait to bring her to you and human design to you next week. Please hit like and subscribe on your way out the locker room door. Share this episode with a friend. We know there's scarcity in the ethers, folks. Help us get these resources out into our people's experience when the world clearly needs this type of resource more than ever. That's it. That's all. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.